Las Vegas, 1974. The spotlight blazes down on the International Hotel stage as Elvis Presley, draped in his iconic white jumpsuit, scans the crowd of thousands. His eyes stop on a small figure in the third row, a young girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a faded dress and clutching a handwritten sign that simply reads, "Please help my mama." In that moment, the king of rock and roll's heart breaks wide open. And what happens next will remind the world that sometimes the greatest performances happen not with music, but with pure, unfiltered human kindness. The air in the International Hotel was thick with anticipation and cigarette smoke as Elvis took the stage for his second show of the evening. He'd been performing in Vegas for 5 years now, and while the glitz and glamour still thrilled him, he sometimes felt disconnected from the sea of faces that looked up at him each night. Tonight felt different, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why dot as he launched into, "That's all right." His practiced eye swept the audience, taking in the usual mix of tourists, high rollers, and devoted fans. But something caught his attention in the third row, a splash of color that didn't belong in the sophisticated Vegas crowd. A little girl, no more than 8 or 9, sat next to an elderly woman who appeared to be sleeping. The child wore a simple yellow dress that had seen better days, and her dark hair was pulled back with what looked like a rubber band. But it wasn't her appearance that made Elvis's voice catch slightly on the next verse. It was the cardboard sign she held up with both small hands. In crayon, with the unsteady letters of a child's handwriting, it read, "Please help my mama. She's very sick." Elvis felt something shift in his chest, a familiar ache that came whenever he encountered genuine need. He'd grown up poor in Tupelo, Mississippi, and he remembered what it felt like to watch his parents struggle, to see his mother Gladys work herself to exhaustion just to put food on the table. This little girl's simple plea transported him back to those days, and suddenly the elaborate staging and theatrical lighting seemed less important than the small figure holding that sign dot. As the song ended and the crowd erupted in applause, Elvis made a decision that would change not just the course of the evening, but the lives of everyone in that room. He walked to the edge of the stage, knelt down, and pointed directly at the little girl. "Sweetheart," he said into the microphone, his voice gentle but carrying throughout the vast room, "would you like to come up here with me?" The audience murmured with curiosity and excitement. This wasn't part of the usual show, but then again, Elvis was known for his spontaneous moments. The little girl looked around nervously, clutching her sign tighter, and shook her head shyly. "It's okay, honey," Elvis continued, his voice taking on the tender tone he used when speaking to children. "I just want to talk to you about that sign you're holding. Will you come up here? I promise I won't bite." The crowd chuckled, but Elvis's attention remained fixed on the child. After what seemed like an eternity, she nodded slowly and made her way toward the stage, helped by security guards who had quickly understood the king's intention. As the little girl was lifted onto the stage, Elvis knelt down to her eye level, temporarily forgetting about the thousands of people watching. Up close, he could see that her yellow dress was carefully mended in several places, and her shoes were worn but clean. Despite her nervousness, there was a dignity about her that reminded him of his own mother's quiet strength. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Elvis asked softly, though his voice still carried through the microphone, clipped to his jumpsuit. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice barely audible even with the sound system. "Sarah, that's a beautiful name," Elvis said with genuine warmth. "Can you tell me about your sign, honey?" "About your mama?" Sarah looked down at the cardboard in her hands, then back up at Elvis with eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "Mama's real sick," she said, her voice growing slightly stronger. "She's sleeping right there." She pointed to the elderly woman in the audience, who Elvis now realized wasn't just tired. She appeared to be quite ill. "That's your mama?" Elvis asked gently. "No, sir. That's my grandma. Mama's at the hospital. She's got the cancer, and the doctors say—" Sarah's voice trailed off, but she took a deep breath and continued. "Grandma says we might lose our house, 'cause the medicine costs too much money." A hush fell over the entire audience. This wasn't the entertainment they'd paid for, but somehow it felt more important than any song Elvis could sing. Many people in the crowd began to lean forward, straining to hear every word of this unexpected, heartbreaking intermission. Elvis felt his throat tighten. He'd lost his beloved mother Gladys to heart failure when he was just 23, and the pain of that loss still felt fresh, even 16 years later. The thought of this little girl potentially losing her mother, and possibly her home as well, stirred something deep within him. "How old are you, Sarah?" he asked. 8.5, she replied with the precision that children use when every month feels significant. 8.5, Elvis repeated. "You know, when I was about your age, my mama and daddy and we didn't have much money either. Sometimes we worried about keeping our house too." Sarah's eyes widened. It was probably hard for her to imagine that this man in this sparkling jumpsuit, performing in front of thousands of people in this glittering palace, had ever worried about anything as ordinary as paying rent. "But you know what got us through the hard times?" Elvis continued. "People helping people. Neighbors helping neighbors. Sometimes strangers helping strangers." He paused and looked out at the audience, then back at Sarah. "What's your mama's name?" "Linda," Sarah said. "Linda Mae Johnson." "Linda Mae Johnson," Elvis repeated, as if he were committing it to memory. "And where is she getting her treatment?" "Sunrise Hospital," Sarah answered. "Room 314. Grandma takes me to see her every day after school. But today, Grandma said she saved up enough money to bring me here, 'cause she knows I love your music. She said maybe if I held up my sign, somebody might help." Elvis felt tears threatening to spill over. The innocence of this child's faith, the desperate hope of a grandmother who spent her last dollars on entertainment in the hopes that somehow, someway, help might come, it was almost too much to bear. Elvis stood up slowly, Sarah's small hand still in his, and faced the audience. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The king of rock and roll, who had performed for presidents and packed stadiums around the world, found himself struggling to find words. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I've been performing for most of my life, and I've been blessed, more blessed than any man has a right to be. But sometimes ... He paused, looking down at Sarah, then back at the crowd. "Sometimes you meet someone who reminds you what really matters in this world." He knelt back down beside Sarah, who was now holding his hand with both of hers. "Sarah, honey, I want to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth, okay?" She nodded solemnly. "Besides helping your mama get better, what do you want more than anything else in the whole world?" Sarah thought for a moment, her face scrunched up in concentration. "I want to sing," she said finally. "Like you do. Mama always said I had a pretty voice, and she used to sing with me before she got sick." "She did she?" Elvis smiled through his tears. "Well, would you like to sing something with me right now?" Sarah's face lit up for the first time since she'd been on stage. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it, sweetheart. What's your favorite song?" Without hesitation, Sarah answered, "Love Me Tender." Mama used to sing it to me at bedtime. Elvis felt his heart break a little more. "Love Me Tender" had been one of his first big hits, and it was also one of the gentlest songs in his repertoire, perfect for a little girl to sing. He signaled to his band, and the familiar opening chords filled the air dot as Elvis began to sing. His voice was softer than usual, more intimate. But when Sarah joined in for the chorus, something magical happened. Her small, clear voice blended perfectly with his deeper tones, and the combination was so pure, so genuine, that you could have heard a pin drop in that vast room. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go ... When they reached the line, you have made my life complete. And I love you so. Elvis's voice cracked completely. Tears were streaming down his face, and he wasn't the only one. Throughout the audience, people were openly weeping, moved not just by the unexpected duet, but by the raw human emotion on display. As the song ended, Sarah looked up at Elvis with wonder. Was that okay? She asked. Elvis wiped his eyes and smiled at her. Sweetheart, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. The audience erupted in applause, but Elvis held up his hand for quiet. Now, Sarah, I want you to go back to your grandma, okay? But first, I need you to write down your address and your mama's room number at the hospital. He handed her a piece of paper and a pen, and Sarah carefully wrote down the information in her neat, childish handwriting. Thank you, Mr. Elvis, she said as a security guard prepared to help her down from the stage. No, honey, Elvis replied, his voice still thick with emotion. Thank you. You've reminded me why I started singing in the first place. After Sarah returned to her seat, Elvis stood alone on the stage for a long moment, collecting himself. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a conviction that everyone in the room could feel. Ladies and gentlemen, I've made a lot of money in my career, more than a poor boy from Tupelo ever dreamed of having. But I've learned something over the years. Money's just paper unless you use it to help people. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces before him. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to pay every single medical bill for Sarah's mama, Linda Mae Johnson. And I'm going to make sure that little family never has to worry about losing their home. The audience exploded in cheers, but Elvis wasn't finished. But here's the thing, I can't be everywhere at once. There are people right here in Las Vegas, right here in this room tonight, who are struggling just like Sarah's family. People who work 2 jobs and still can't make ends meet. People who have to choose between buying medicine and buying groceries. He walked to the other side of the stage, his rhinestone jumpsuit catching the lights. So I'm going to challenge every single person in this room. When you leave here tonight, I want you to find one person, just one, who needs help. Maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's a stranger. Maybe it's someone you work with. And I want you to help them. Not because you have to, not because someone's watching, but because that's what we're supposed to do for each other. The response was overwhelming. People were standing, applauding, many still wiping tears from their eyes. But Elvis still wasn't done. And if you're not sure how to help, or if you want to do more, I'm going to give you an address where you can send donations. We're going to start a Fund Sarah's Hope foundation to help families right here in Nevada who are dealing with medical emergencies. He gestured toward Sarah, who was watching from her seat with wide eyes. This little girl and her family shouldn't have to face this alone. No family should. And if we all work together, they won't have to. The rest of the concert took on a different energy. Elvis performed some of his biggest hits, but between songs, he continued to talk about the importance of compassion, of looking out for one another, of using whatever blessings you have to lift others up. The audience sang along with more feeling than usual, as if Sarah's simple act of courage had unlocked something in all of them. When the show ended, Elvis didn't immediately leave the stage. Instead, he walked back to where Sarah and her grandmother were sitting. The older woman was crying softly, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Ma'am," Elvis said gently to Sarah's grandmother, "what's your name?" "Rose," she replied, her voice shaky. "Rose Johnson. Miss Rose, I want you to know that tomorrow, someone from my organization is going to come to the hospital to take care of all the bills. And they're going to help you with whatever else you need, groceries, rent, whatever it takes." Rose Johnson looked up at this famous man with tears streaming down her weathered face. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Elvis knelt down, so he could look directly into her eyes. Because 20 years ago, my mama was sick, and I couldn't help her. I was young and broke and scared, just like Sarah here. I swore that if I ever had the ability to help families like yours, I would. He paused, his voice gentle but firm. And because Sarah had the courage to ask. Sometimes that's all it takes, someone brave enough to ask for help, and someone blessed enough to give it. The ripple effects of that night would continue for years. Sarah's Hope Foundation raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, helping countless families in Nevada and beyond. Sarah herself, inspired by Elvis's kindness and encouraged by that night on stage, would eventually pursue a career in music therapy, using song to heal others just as Elvis had used his platform to heal her family. Elvis Presley passed away just 3 years after that magical night in Las Vegas, but the impact of his generosity lived on. Sarah's mother made a full recovery, and the family never forgot the kindness of the man who stopped his show to listen to the plea of a desperate child. The Sarah's Hope Foundation continued to operate for decades, eventually helping thousands of families facing medical crises. Sarah Johnson grew up to become a successful music therapist and motivational speaker, always beginning her presentations with the story of the night Elvis taught her that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply ask for help and be ready to give it when someone else does the same, ready to make a difference in someone's life today. Visit your local hospital or community center and ask how you can help a family in need. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen, just like Elvis did that night in 1974.